Okay, so we'll just start off with the Surgeon General declaring gun violence as a public health crisis. He did that yesterday. What's your perspective on that declaration?
Well, as much travel as I've done in my former career being a coach and now being a so-called politician, we have locations all over the country that we have huge problems with guns. And where is that? They're inner cities. And most of that is obviously crime problem, and we have a huge mental health problem also with that. Obviously, we have the Second Amendment, and I'm all for guns, protecting ourselves when our government won't. But we do have a problem. We have a crime problem. We have a law enforcement problem that's very underfunded, and that's getting worse. I don't know why anybody would want to be a law enforcement officer when they're not protected. They're scrutinized whenever they do something right to try to uphold laws. It's a combination of things. But I can understand where they're coming from about the guns, because we do have a huge crime problem in this country.
Do you think the declaration is necessary, calling this a public health crisis?
No, I don't think it's necessary. I think we should call crime a problem, and it is a problem. Our Department of Justice pretty much in the bigger cities have quit arresting people, putting them in jails. They go in the front door after the law enforcement arrests people, and they go out the back door, or they have no cash bail. They have all the rights, and the victims have no rights anymore. It's just, unfortunately, we've gone that direction. We've got to get control of our streets. Once you lose control of your neighborhoods, your streets, then you don't have a country anymore, and we're headed in that direction. We are very, very underforced when it comes to law enforcement, and I think people need to start understanding that. And when we get to this election in November, I think people are going to vote because of the crime on the streets that has been very unprotected to the American people.
And what about the mental health aspect of this? There is a mental health aspect a lot of the times. These actions are in part due to mental health. What can we do at the federal level to ensure that that is being addressed to possibly prevent further gun violence?
Yeah, mental health should be taken care of by the federal government, by the state government, and local government. And in my lifetime, we had a huge influx of mental health. A lot of it has to do with drugs and alcohol. But if you just go back 90 years ago, we had mental health groups in this country that took care of over 500,000 people that had mental health problems, that were actually in programs that would help them overcome mental health. Now, this was 90 years ago. This one when we were probably 150 million people, maybe even less than that. You know, today we only have 30,000 people that are being worked with mental health problems. So we've gone in 90 years from 500,000 to 30,000. So what I'm saying to you, we don't have an answer to mental health. We're not working towards mental health. We need more of that. In our state here, we have, I think, 16 locations. They took all the money in the last 10 years and put into mental health, and we have 16 locations around the state that work very hard on mental health. So we've actually got a better mental health program in this state than most states do, but still it's not enough. There needs to be more federal funding. There needs to be more state funding. We need more housing. We need more institutions where we can help people. If our mental health program is get somebody off the street that has a mental health problem and putting them in jail for a week, 2 weeks, and then after that short period of time they turn them back out on the street, that's not a mental health program. And we need to have better answers, is what I'm telling you. And again, it obviously takes money, and our country's growing, but we're not growing when it comes to helping the mental health.
And the U.S. Surgeon General also mentioned community intervention resources, as well as suggesting requiring safe storage of firearms, implementing universal background checks, as well as banning assault firearms and large capacity magazines for civilians. Would you back any of those efforts that he's suggesting should happen?
I don't want to do anything to take away from our Second Amendment rights, the right to defend yourself, okay? Now, over the many, many years, we've had more different types of guns made and weapons made, explosives made. But again, you got to look at the Constitution here. If we're going to start tearing down our Constitution, we're going to have huge problems. We live in a state here where people love their guns, and they love the opportunity to hunt. They love the opportunity to protect themselves and their families, and I'm all for that. I'm not for starting at any level where we start taking away any part of our guns. Now, I understand that there's some weapons that people might say are not useful, but I argued with some of my Democratic colleagues about this. They can't tell you what some of these weapons are. They just think that they're out there somewhere. Most of them don't know anything about weapons like we do here in the South in Alabama. We know a lot about weapons because we use them to hunt and use to protect ourselves with. But it's an ongoing argument. But again, we've always got to go back to the Constitution and give the people a right to carry a gun.
What about more protections as far as the universal background checks and removal policies when people are clearly a danger to themselves or others?
No, well, I think obviously if you're a felon, that you shouldn't have the right to carry a gun. You lose your rights when you have broken the law and those kind of things. If drug addiction, anything that to do if you've been convicted of drug addiction, possibly a mental health problem. I think there's avenues that you could possibly look at to limit the use of a firearm with certain people. But again, at the end of the day, it's a right that we all have. And even here in our state, it's constitutional carry now. Used to, you'd have to go and buy your certificate of carrying a firearm, from your local sheriff. And they've done away with a lot of that now. I carry a gun a lot of times in Washington, D.C., but I had to go get a permit to do that, which you had to jump through bells and whistles to get it done, but I did it and did it the right way. And so if there is a law that says that you need to do that, everybody needs to follow that law. But again, at the end of the day, you should have the right to be able to carry a gun if you want to carry one.
And moving on to in vitro fertilization, it's been a huge deal in Alabama. The legislature took it on this year, coming up with an immunity law for providers after the Alabama State Supreme Court ruling. Do you think there needs to be federal action to further secure IVF?
Well, no, I don't. And I know my fellow senator believes that there should be a federal mandate. I believe that it's just like abortion. It should be voted on by the state. Now, I have a lot of friends that used IVF to have a family. I'm all for family. And that's the difference between being in Washington, D.C. I see the Democratic Party, they're not against family, but they make it harder for families to happen, the nuclear family. Republican Party, we're more for families. We're more for building up families, having more kids, doing the things that we're put on earth for. And so IVF's, I think it's kind of like the abortion. Roe Wade was kicked down in the states. I think every state should have the right to vote on IVF. Here we did it right in our state. Our legislative group passed it. Governor Ivey signed it. And so in our state, IVF is legal, and it should be. Again, I'm 120% for IVFs. And a lot of this is used for political chess. They use it against Republicans or use it against Democrats. At the end of the day, we all got to look at common sense here, knowing that, hey, the good Lord put us here for a reason, and I truly am a big believer in family, and I think IVF is a huge advantage for us to be able to have that. Now, you've got Ted Cruz and Katie Britt that's got this federalization of IVF. That's their prerogative to do that, but I still think that each state should have the ability to vote on it and not be federally mandated.
And going back to the Alabama law that was passed, that was an immunity bill for providers
Right.
to give them kind of a safeguard feeling that they could continue IVF. Do you think that there needs to be a further law in Alabama providing that IVF is completely protected? There had been a constitutional amendment kind of kicked around in the session.
Yeah, well, if it takes that to where IVF is 100% available in this state, it should be. I don't know how far they've gone with their law. I really don't. But When I looked at and read the bill that they put on the floor in the House and the Senate here in the state, it was protecting the use of IVF. And I think if you can get into the weeds with all this, just give people the opportunity and the right to have a family. I think that's what we all want.
And understanding that you don't think that there should be a federal law for this, there have been Republican and Democratic bills in the Senate. They were both blocked by each other. Do you think that this should be a partisan issue when it comes down to it, a treatment trying to allow families to have children?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, federal government gets way too involved in anything that the people of every state have the opportunity to do. And again, I think that it's so important that we give more power back to our states, give more power back to the people, give you a chance to vote on it, give you a chance to vote on what you want in your state. And that's what we did with Roe Wade. That's what President Trump and the Supreme Court did. They said, hey, let's take the federal government out of this. I mean, why should they talk for everybody in the country? We don't have a magic wand to make everything right. Give the people of the country a chance to vote, the way they feel. And again, one of the first votes after Roe Wade went back to the states. Kansas vote on the right for abortion. They voted for it. And so, hey, if that's the way they want it, that's the way they should have it. The federal government should be taken out of most of these things when it comes down to anything to do with a family.
And when we're talking about bipartisanship, how important is that when we're trying to solve issues in general for Americans and Alabamians?
Bipartisanship is few and far between in Washington, D.C. Right now, we're probably as divided as we've ever been, and it's just for some reason there's a faction that up there that wants to control. As Republicans, I again want to give more power back to the states, give more power back to the people, but for some reason the Democrats at this point and the government, how they're running it, it's more of, hey, we want to control everything that people do. We want to tell you why you do it, when you can do it, how long you can do it. And to me, it's overkill. We spend way too much money in Washington, D.C. You know, we spent $5 trillion more my first 3 years in the Senate than we should have. I mean, that's $5 trillion. You know how much $1 trillion is? You can't count $1 trillion in, 10 or 15 years. That's how much it is. It's crazy, the money that we're spending. We've got to get out of people's lives in the federal government and give the lives and the thoughts and the wishes back to the citizens of this country and take out the federal government, because the federal government is for the federal government. They're not for the people of this country.
And you mentioned Congress is as divided as it's ever been, in your opinion. How do you bridge that gap then? How do we come together to make decisions as a whole group instead of one party and the other? 248
years. We had a game plan in this country. I go by game plan being a coach. We had a game plan in this country to let everybody live their own lives, okay? But you had a small portion of rules. It was called the Constitution. And for some reason, the federal government, they like to live on the edge of the Constitution. Well, we believe the Constitution says this, or we believe the Constitution says that. But for 248 years, we never really argued with the Constitution. And we've made it a long time. This constitutional republic has stood for longer than any true democracy, because we had a set of rules that everybody wanted to go by. Now we have a division in Washington, D.C. that some want to go by the Constitution and a lot of them want to change it and go to something else. If we do that, we're not going to have 248 more years of the greatest country ever on the face of the earth. So that's the reason elections have consequences. I'm a Republican. I'm very conservative. I believe in God. I believe in education, low crime, giving people the opportunity to live their lives out and take advantage of that opportunity. But right now, the Republicans are so overwhelmingly controlling what we do in our country. Our borders are wide open. The crime is rampant. Our education system is going south quickly. Inflation is skyrocketing, and it's self-imposed because of what we did with gas and oil. We can't run a country off electricity. You know, we'd like to, but we can't do it. We have to have gas and oil. So all those things factor up where the Democrats believe that they have the answers And Republicans think they have the answers, and the answers that we have is the Constitution. Their answers are coming up with a new Constitution, and I just don't believe that.
You mentioned a lot of the problems that you see. How have you tried to work with your Democratic colleagues to solve those issues?
Well, first of all, you can bypass the gas and oil. We can take care of that. Elections take care of that. We can answer the crime problem to a certain degree. We can answer the inflation problem. And for some reason, we're not answering education, but I think sooner or later we'll be forced to do that. The one thing that is happening to our country right now, if we don't stop it, it will be the end of the United States of America. It's the open borders. We cannot have an open border. We have the best country ever. The people, your parents, your great-grandparents, and everybody before them built the greatest country ever on the face of the earth. Everybody wants to come here because they didn't have people that built that constitutional republic like our parents and great-grandparents did. And so now that we've got open borders, those people are coming, 5,000 to 10,000 people a day. People don't realize how many people that is. We have been overwhelmed. I don't know whether we can ever get out of the situation that we're in because of this, because it brings so many other things. We're having to educate them, health care, feed, provide, and it's like taking in a whole nother state or states and taking care of them by our taxpayer money. And it's causing so many problems. Every day there's problems that we have to answer because of the millions of people that have come across that border. And we shouldn't have to be answering those questions and paying for them by taxpayer money. The taxpayers deserve better than that. The citizens in this country deserve a stable border where we allow legal immigration, people to come here to help this country prosper. Right now we're letting people come in that don't know this country, they don't understand our language, they're taken from our country instead of giving back. We want people to come here to help this country become better.
And going back to the bipartisan question, you bring up open borders. How do you work with your Democratic colleagues to solve that?
Well, they don't want to solve it. They're globalists. I talk to them every day. And we have 51 senators in the Democratic side, and every bill that we've tried to pass that would do something to help our Border Patrol and our ICE, the people that are in charge of immigration in this country, they vote it down. They don't want any answers to the border. They think more people coming here will give them the opportunity for more voters for them, and so they can remain in power. That's all this is about. It's about votes. And again, the American taxpayer is not thought about. The American taxpayer is paying all the bills. They're suffering from that. It's going to even get worse. Even if President Trump, and hopefully wins, but if he wins in November, it's going to be very hard for him to tackle this situation. But the first thing that he will do is he's going to close the border. We can't continue to allow 5,000 to 10,000 a day. Since January the 1st, we've had over 20,000 Russians come here. Now, from Russia. Now, last I heard, we're in a proxy war with Russia. We've had almost 100,000 people from China come. And last I heard, we have a big competitive game going on right now with China, with Taiwan and China. So how can you have adversaries and then you're allowing them to come to your country and not knowing who they are or where they're at and what they're here for? So we got huge problems, but for some reason the Democratic Party right now, they don't want to answer those problems. They just want to let the problems build up and give them an opportunity to maintain control through the ballot box.
And you mentioned Ukraine and Russia. What's your perspective on what's going on with that right now?
I've never, since the war started, and I was over there right before the war started, met with Zelensky. They knew they were coming. They knew Russia was coming. We all knew they were coming. We tried to get Joe Biden to help put more weapons on the border to help them, to let Vladimir Putin and Russia know, hey, don't do it. You know, we're going to stand behind them. Well, we didn't do it. Well, so here they come. Then all of a sudden we decided to put weapons in. We've spent close to $200 billion, and they can't win. It's like a junior high playing a college football team. It's not going to happen. They don't have the numbers. Now, all we're trying to do now is we're trying to hold Vladimir Putin, and hopefully we can move him back to maybe his original starting point, which was already into Ukraine, and then do some negotiations. The first day President Trump, if he gets elected, he will solve this problem. He will negotiate. We've not had 1 minute of negotiation with Russia from the United States. I don't understand that. People are getting killed every day. There's been 500,000 people killed in this fight, and it's like, well, we don't care. You know, it's Ukrainians and it's Russians. Hey, they're still people. So this administration has no negotiation skills. I've talked with them, met with them. I'm on Armed Services Committee, and it just and it's wrong how this whole thing has transpired, and nobody's really been concerned about the Ukrainians or the Russians.
And much of the rhetoric around that war has been a lot of blame placed on the Biden administration. But when we do that, are we not giving Vladimir Putin a pass in a way? He's the one who invaded Ukraine.
Yeah, well, he is. I could sit here for 30 minutes and tell you why he did it. Number one, it would be like China saying, okay, we're going to come into Mexico and we're going to put weapons on Mexico-U.S. border. We'd be in a war in a heartbeat if that happened. We got mad when Russia came to Cuba, you know, in the Russia-Cuban the crisis years ago. And even now when they're there, we're mad that they're there. Nobody likes their adversaries on their borders. Same thing with Russia. They're fine with NATO. They just doesn't want NATO on their border there in Ukraine. And they said, listen, that's a non-go for us. You know, you do that, we're going to have huge problems. All we had to do is say NATO is not going to be taking Ukraine as a NATO partner, and this would never have happened. But we're playing Russian roulette here. United States and the Democrats and Joe Biden and the State Department are playing with fire here because, you know, now we're giving long-range weapons. United States is giving long-range weapons that this past weekend were shot into Russia from Ukraine that killed civilians. Now, you want to start a war, that's a good way to do it. If China or Russia came to Mexico and shot weapons in the United States and killed civilians, game on. I mean, it would be war. So we're playing with fire. There's no negotiation. I don't trust this administration whatsoever when it comes to the Department of Defense or the State Department, simply for the fact that I'm in all those meetings and I hear how they talk. And it's not about anything other than keeping a created war going on while we can, for some reason, keep off the main things that we should be worried about, which is what we talked about earlier: crime, inflation, our borders. So we have fires all over the world, and when we should be worrying about everything here and making America better, we're worried about spending money over in Ukraine and other places. And I'll tell you, we've got Ukraine and Russia, we've got China and Taiwan, we've got Israel and Palestinians, and now we've got Africa. We've got another war just about to blaze up down in Africa, and we have no answers because nobody really, they look at us as kind of a paper soldier now, as not somebody that, hey, we don't want to mess with the United States. We're not as strong as we used to be. We can't recruit anybody in the military hardly. Our recruiting numbers are way down. We have the greatest missiles and weapons ever, and we built a lot of them here in Alabama. But for some reason, we cannot and won't be respected like the militaries of the past of the United States because of how we've, you know, kind of downgraded our military through woke and DEI initiatives.
Are you suggesting perhaps the U.S. should completely remove themselves from the Ukrainian and Russian war, or, you know, what's the suggestion there?
Yeah, just negotiate out. I mean, when you have problems, you negotiate. Somebody go over there and sit down with Putin and Zelensky and work this out. If you went today, Zelensky would say, listen, get us out of this war. Okay, right now all we're doing is paying him to stay in the war. We're sending over billions of taxpayer dollars to stay in this war. And there's really no answers. The only answer is to go to Putin and get Zelensky together, figure out a stopping point of where the borders are, and then say, listen, this is it. Okay, if you come across these borders again, we're getting involved. You have to do something like that. You've got to hold people accountable. But right now, again, there's no answers because there's no negotiation.
And I want to talk about veterans real quick. I know that's one of your main focal points. Later this week, you're going to have something to do with community care for veterans. What does that entail?
Well, community care was put in years ago because here's what happened. The VA is the largest healthcare system in the world. Costs us a lot of money. Rightly so. We should take care of our veterans. After they've gone over and fought and kept our country safe and paid the price, some losing limbs and eyes, being burned, all those kind of things, or just going over and spending their time, we should help them with their health care. The VA, all over the country, again, we have thousands of VAs. Some are pretty good. We have some good ones here in our state, but we have some that are not so good. We have some that are in rural areas that our rural veterans have a hard time getting to Birmingham or getting to Montgomery or Mobile. They live a couple hours away, and they can't, number one, can't afford to do it, or health-wise can't afford, just can't get there. So we started this community care program where the veterans could go, instead of having to go all the way to a VA, could go to their local hospital or their local doctor. They would take care of them. It's called community care. Well, the VA, the veteran system, and the Democrats, they don't want to do that. They don't want community care. They want everybody, if you're a veteran, to go to a VA. And it's just not possible. It's not feasible. And we have the money to do it. We have all kinds of money that we've appropriated to the VAs. But this is another divide from Democrats to Republicans. Republicans believe in community care and the VA. Democrats want just the VA. And why they do that? Because strictly in the VA, they're all union workers. If they go to community care, they're just regular hospitals workers. They're not unions. You can get just as good a care. But again, the Democratic Party is built on unions, and so they're trying to protect their union money.
And I know the state of Alabama, they passed a bill in efforts to create a better mental health care system for veterans. You know, how important is it on the state level to also get involved in veteran health care?
Yeah, well, it's more of a federal issue. These VAs are funded pretty much 100% by federal money. But again, I think the places that the states could help would be more in these community care areas. We do have a huge mental health problem. I keep talking to my Democratic colleagues about, we're losing 22 veterans a day commit suicide a day because they either have PTSD or they're hooked on some kind of drug that a doctor's giving them trying to get off, some kind of a health problem. And we should not be losing any veterans to suicide. That's our fault. That's our fault as Americans. That's our fault as American taxpayers. We owe it to these veterans to take care of them. But there is a huge mental health problem when it comes to veterans that have been over these foreign wars, the one that we just had for 20 years. They went through things, they saw things that they would have never dreamed of seeing. Then they come back here and they try to what I call detoxify, and they can't get it out of their system. And they can't get over the horrible things that they saw. We owe that to these young men and women that have gone over, and some have even paid the ultimate price. We owe it to them to help them get through these tough times.
And locally, we've been seeing kind of an issue when it comes to infrastructure problems related to mining. We're in a mine, we have a lot of people have made their living off of mining here in central Alabama. Should there be a deeper look at the federal level when it comes to the impacts of mining on local infrastructure and the environment? Yeah,
well, there should be a better way to keep up with old mines. Over the years, if you go back and look probably 50, 60, 70 years, there were probably some mines that weren't done away with the proper way. And I know you're having a problem here on one of the roadways, which is, by the way, it's going to be more of a local and county issue. But I can understand that. There probably needs to be more oversight of wells that are and mines that are dug anywhere, whether it's this state or anywhere. You should take care of that mine or well if you're going to abandon it, instead of just saying, hey, here it is, we're gone, we're out of here. Probably a lot of these were done years ago. I know now most of the mines are taken care of at the end of the day, of how they, refurb them, fill them back in, do things that are 100% safe. But the situation you have here with the road, that mine was probably, had been there years ago, which is causing problems. And if, it's never too late to start doing what you need to do, but I know for a fact that we are taking care of the mines here in our state that have over the years needed to be filled in and taken care of. They're being taken care of.
Last question for you, dealing with ARPA funds. A lot of those funds are expiring or have expired. Do we know where that money was spent over the last 4 years? No. Federal governments, they're the worst at anything of keeping up where money's gone. We flushed out $6, $7, $8 trillion into our economy. Now, I will tell you this, with all that money that we supposedly flushed out there, a lot of it was done the right way, but there was a lot of fraud involved in it, a lot of fraud. I mean, there was a lot of money stolen. I know that I went through several hearings when I first got to Washington, D.C. 3.5 years ago, and I couldn't believe the money that California had lost that was given away as supposedly unemployment for people that were laid off because of COVID. And but there were gangs and there were cartels that came in. It took billions of dollars away from California fraudulently. That being said, when you put that much money out there, you can't keep up with it. I'm very skeptical of our military. Our military, we cannot get an accounting of the almost $1 trillion we spend a year towards our military. And again, I'm all for the best military in the world, but I want it to be spent the right way and going towards weapons instead of going out the back door in somebody's pocket. Our federal government has gotten so big, you can't keep up with it, can't keep up with the money, where it's going. Right now, our economy is in a kind of a tailspin, and we're not in a tailspin in some areas, and I'll tell you why. Right now, we are printing $80,000 a second to keep this country afloat. Don't you think about that? $80,000 a second we're printing, putting out into our country just to keep our country going because of all of the federal bureaucracy that we've hired and that we're having to pay. We have 23 million federal employees. It's hard to pay all those people. And right now we're just flushing money and printing money right and left, trying to keep up. We're too big. We're top heavy in our country. Washington, D.C. we got to cut back. I've talked to President Trump about this. We've listened to some of his advisors. We have got to cut back our federal bureaucracy. If we don't, we're not going to be able to afford it. And the taxes are going to go through the roof. And we've got to address the problem before we get to that point. Going back to the ARPA funds, is there any way to do a reaccounting of where that money went, put it in a database somewhere so someone can see it? Is there any way that we could eventually see where that money went?
Yeah, well, the problem that you have, it goes to so many different layers of agencies in the bureaucracy. It's not like, okay, we're going to give $300,000 to some group to make sure that they can make it, and then they got to pay that back because a certain amount of it back, but a certain amount of it's a grant. That's what we had during COVID. I was starting getting so many calls during COVID. Coach, we're a bank here in Opelika. We keep getting the rules changed on the money that's given to us that we're giving out as grants or as loans. When can y'all give us the answers to this? You would be shocked at how many times that we would call, well, we'll give you an answer in a week. We'll give you the answer in 2 weeks. Our federal government is too big. Everybody's pointing at somebody else to solve the problem. And it's continuing to getting bigger and bigger. It's not getting smaller. And again, that's the reason we've got to do something about our federal government. We've got to cut back so we can keep up with the money that we give out as loans, the monies that we give out as grants, to cut back on the fraud. It's totally out of control.
How do we cut back on America's spending without leaving, some Americans without what they need.
Oh yeah, if you look at it, 2/3 of our money that we spend is mandatory, which is Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid, and military. And then you've got about 1/3 of it is discretionary, what we appoint to go to certain places. We got to cut back. We have no choice. We're overspending as we speak. This year we just passed an NDAA, which is the budget for the military, and it's going to be for the first time around $800–900 billion. Now that's just for 1 year. We're doing the Farm Bill. I'm on the Ag Committee. It's a 5-year bill, so it's cut up, for 5 years. The last bill was $880 billion. We need to help our farmers. This bill this year will be $1.5 trillion. Okay. Now, unfortunately, almost 2/3 of that, even more than 2/3 of that, is not going to our farmers. It's going to SNAP cards and food stamps. It's going toward nutrition. Now, we need to help people, okay? We need to help people, our elderly, our veterans, people that can't take care of themselves. I'm all for taking single mom families, making sure they can take care of their kids. We got way too many people sitting on the couch taking a check. COVID really put us over the top, and we've got to break that. We cannot continue to spend, $1.3 trillion every 5 years and half of that doesn't need to be spent because people need to be working. I want to say this about farmers. I've been up there almost 4 years. We've lost 150,000 farms in 4 years. Our farmers are going broke. We got to help them. I think I talk to a lot of my Democratic colleagues, they think, and I'm going out on a limb here, they think a lot of our food is grown out back of Walmart and then just go pick the food and bring it inside. They don't realize farmers work 365 days and 24 hours a day just trying to make a crop and trying to make a living. But we're losing farmers right and left. And if we continue this pace, all of our food is going to come from other countries. Like our drugs are coming from China that we found out from COVID. We're looking around and going, wait a minute, where's a mask that I'm gonna wear? Well, we can't get them because they're made in China. We've got to get manufacturing back here. People tell me, okay, Coach, you got the answers here. We're spending too much money. How do we get our debt down, which is $35 trillion? The only way we can get it down, which we could cut a little bit, we got to grow our country. We got to bring manufacturing back. We got to start making things ourselves. Just for instance, in Fort Payne and Rainsville area years ago, we made almost all the socks in the United States and the world. They had sock factories up there. They're all going where now? They're going to China. NAFTA killed us. Bill Clinton sold us out, and all of our small manufacturing plants moved to other countries. We cannot continue that to happen. We've got to get a president of the United States like Donald Trump to say, listen, our manufacturing's coming back because that's the only way we can pick up and gain more tax money instead of taxing more people, get more people here where more money comes in taxes and we can pay our debt down. We're not ever going to be able to cut back enough to cut back on $35 trillion. In your lifetime and your kids' lifetime, that's never going to happen. They're going to have to pay the price and pay the loan on that for many, many years.